Over to meteorologist David Keller with a look at today.
Emily, it really has been one of the more significant tornado outbreaks our region has seen in recent memory. So far, we've compiled 63 reports of tornado sightings or damage across the 6 News viewing area. And you can see several defined tracks from these thunderstorms. We can isolate about 5 different significant tornado tracks that occurred here this afternoon, beginning just before 3 o'clock in northeast Lincoln. We saw that tornado cross I-80. It flipped some vehicles there right along Highway 6, damaging some industrial buildings. That dissipated in Saunders County, but then quickly redeveloped and became that destructive tornado that passed through Elkhorn, through Bennington, southeast of Blair. A rough estimate, at least 30 miles on the ground with that tornado. And then very quickly after that, we saw that tornado touch down right at Epley Airfield, lifting through Crescent, crossing I-80 there in northwestern Pottawatomie County. And then another storm system dropped a tornado near Pacific Junction. That lifted briefly. And then we saw another long track tornado through Pottawatomie County up into Shelby County, perhaps 40 miles on that tornado track. So some very significant tornadoes here tracking through the heart of our viewing area today, thankfully becoming much quieter out there tonight. And it looks like tomorrow morning will be a cool, quiet start. Back to you guys.
All right.